Welcome to a Cisco meeting. You are entering the meeting now.
Oh, I think I hear you loud and clear. I just wanted to make sure that I'm talking to Alconbury Middle School in the United Kingdom.
Yes, you are.
I am Alex Zucala, Student Body President of Alconbury Middle-High School in Cambridgeshire, England. On behalf of the students, staff, Principal Michael Jemison, Principal Nidra Harwell, and the Commander of the 501st Combat Support Wing, Colonel Kurt Wendt, I would like to welcome Astronaut Dr. Drew Morgan and all our viewers from around the globe.
All right, good. I just wanted to get a good comms check and introduce myself very quickly before we got into questions. Would that be okay?
Yes.
So I just wanted to welcome you aboard the International Space Station, tell you a little bit about it. I'm right now orbiting the Earth about 250 miles above the Earth, traveling at over 17,000 miles per hour. We make an orbit of the Earth every 90 minutes. We probably make about 16 orbits in a day. I am an active duty Army officer by training. I am a physician, and I was selected as an astronaut in 2013, and I've been on board the International Space Station now for the last 7 months. I got here in July, and I'll return in April. But long before that, I was a military kid from a military family, just like many of you out there that are watching. And I know we have people dialed in from all over participating in this, and I want to welcome everyone aboard the International Space Station. I grew up in a military family. My dad was an Air Force officer, and not far from where you are, I went to junior high and high school at RAF Woodbridge American High School. That base closed in the early 90s. But one of our rivals was Alconbury and Lake and Heath, and so it's a lot of fun for me to join you. So with that, I would like to talk to you about my experiences, and I'm glad to hear your questions.
If I want to become an astronaut, what advice would you give me?
Well, I think you'd be surprised. My advice would be very simple. The most important thing, first of all, is to do what you love. You need to fall in love with what you want to do and pursue that. The next thing I would tell you is that whatever it is that you pursue excellence in that. You want to pursue the toughest degree, the toughest qualifications, seek out the toughest assignments related to that, practice those in the most difficult circumstances, in the most austere environment. And then finally, I would say that it is very important to be a good team player. That means being a good leader of teams, a good member of teams. Teams are what it's all about at NASA and in my life, my career in the military as well. It has served me very well to learn how to be effective on teams, being a good teammate. Those three things, they sound very simple, and those can lead to you becoming an astronaut, but they will most certainly lead to you having a fulfilling career in whatever it is that you choose.
Thank you.
What interesting findings have you made in the field of microbiology through experiments on board the ISS?
I think the question was about discoveries in the field of microbiology, et cetera, and I think what comes to mind is how we use microbiology to kind of keep an eye on our environment up here. We are constantly taking samples from our water, from the surfaces around, because we live in an enclosed environment, and so we want to understand what kind of microorganisms are living around us to make sure that the environment is staying stable, that it's healthy for us, and it's healthy for the equipment that's all around us. But also related, I wanted to tell you a little bit about a study that I participated in a couple months ago called microgravity crystals. I would call it from the field of biochemistry, so related closely to microbiology. And it looks at how crystals form differently in the absence of gravity. And we think that this can lead to some exciting discoveries in the development of new medications that could potentially treat diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or even cancer. Another study in the field of cell biology that we're working on right now is called osteomics, and that takes a look at cultured bone cells and how they react in microgravity, because how bone changes with long-term exposure to microgravity like I'm living in now is very important for us. So great questions about fields of the natural sciences.
Thank you.
Before you left for space, what personal items were you allowed to pack?
Well, first of all, everything was provided for us up here. So I launched on a rocket with literally only the spacesuit I was wearing. Everything else was already pre-positioned up here for me. Everything from my clothing to my food to drink to hygiene items, and that included personal items as well. We were able to send up here a small container that's about the size of 2 shoe boxes, maybe about this big, that we were able to fill with personal items. And I filled mine with, because of my military background, a lot of memorabilia from... Stand by for 1 sec. I also filled mine with a lot of memorabilia from military units that I was in over the course of my career. And then each of my children also gave me small items to bring with me to remember them by, and things that I would return to them when I come home. I also have lots of pictures in hard copy, even though you can have them electronic. I find it very comforting to have hard copy pictures of my family hanging in my crew quarters as well.
What is your favorite thing to eat in space?
I'm not sure that I completely heard the question. If you wouldn't mind asking it one more time.
What is your favorite thing to eat in space?
Oh, great. I was hoping somebody would ask that question. I thought I would do a little demonstration. So I have, first of all, it would be, I think, exciting for you to see what water does in space. Check this out. And I also have a real sweet tooth. I really like desserts, so I thought I'd show you some of this as well. You might recognize this candy. So I love eating candy on the earth, and I love eating candy on the ground.
Thank you. What is the best way to describe feeling zero gravity to anyone who has never felt it?
I would say that microgravity, the first time you experience it, it's kind of a cross between being upside down and falling. And when I was launched into the rocket, I was strapped into my seat, and when our engine cut off and we were all of a sudden in orbit, that's the first time you experience microgravity. And it felt like I was upside down. In fact, I was convinced I was upside down. And you feel a little bit disoriented for a couple of days, but then eventually, you know, our bodies are very adaptable, and we learn how all of a sudden now it doesn't feel abnormal for me to be upside down. We don't have a sense of what's upside down. I don't feel like I'm upside down right now.
You are.
Or that I'm sideways, or... So your body gets really used to it.
Thank you. What do you do with your free time in space?
Oh, well, that's a great question. So right now, we're up here as a crew of 3, and a couple weeks ago, we had 6, and then at one point in our my time up here, we're a crew of 9. So we certainly spend a lot of time together, and we do things together, like things that you would enjoy doing on Earth with friends. We do watch movies and we watch TV shows and things like that, but we also spend a lot of time looking out the windows. We have some great windows, including two behind me that are closed right now. But we also have some that are in different modules, and we spend time looking out the window, taking pictures. I also spend a lot of time calling friends and family. We have a way that we can call people on the telephone using a voice over internet style phone, and that's that fills up our free time. Not a lot. We don't have a lot of free time. We're very busy. Every minute of the day is scheduled for us, and there's a lot of work to do. And so when we do get time off, it's very precious.
Thank you.
At one time, you were a military child stationed in the UK. What advice would you give to us military-connected students today?
I think I heard the question was about my time as a kid in the UK and how that influenced me. I think it was the gist of the question that I heard. And I'd tell you two things. One is it gave me an appreciation for travel and learning about new cultures. And then the second thing, it made me very resilient and able to adapt to a variety of different situations and make new friends. I know all of you out there that are participating in this and listening understand what that is and the challenges of being in a military family and moving every couple of years, making new friends, and that how challenging that is. But what I think you're going to find is that when you grow up, you're going to find out that it made you really very resilient and very good at making new friends. And as you can imagine, as an astronaut, making new friends and relating to new people and understanding new cultures and appreciating other cultures are all very valuable things. And these are things that you're going to take with you into your adult life as well.
Thank you.
Are you available on June 2nd, and would you consider speaking at our graduation ceremony?
You know what? I would love to. I will return to the Earth in the middle to the later half of April, and I'm still going to be going through some rehabilitation at that point, and so that's probably a little early for me to travel, but I would definitely consider it in the future. I would love to come over and speak to a school full of military kids like you living overseas that had the same experience that I did. It would be a tremendous honor for me to speak at a graduation. I just think that June 2nd might be a little soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
How do you exercise in space?
Well, I will relate this back to the study that I talked about earlier, where we're looking at how bone cells change as a result of being in microgravity for long periods of time, because that is a question that we want to understand well, because we know that bones and muscles change in space. And one of the things that we know that works well to combat that, to counteract that, is exercise. And so we do two general types of exercise. We do cardiovascular exercise, and we do strength training, resistance exercise. And we have a couple different machines for that. We have an exercise bike that doesn't have a seat because there's no gravity to put us down in the seat. So it's kind of like a unicycle without a seat. It's kind of like this. And then we have a treadmill where we wear a harness system with bungees that hold us down onto the treadmill, and so we can also do that as exercise. And then we have a complex machine called the resistive exercise device that allows us to do weight training using a series of pistons and suction in pistons to generate force, and we can do exercises like squats and deadlift and bench press and overhead pressing. And those allow our muscles to feel the resistance as if we were exercising on Earth. And what we find is that this is very good at combating loss of bone mineral density and preventing your muscles from withering away. In fact, many astronauts come back healthier than they leave the Earth. I will be up here for 9 months when I return in April, and I am expecting that I'm going to be healthier than when I left Earth, because we exercise 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and that's not something I'm always ever able to do with a full family life. I have 4 kids, and several of my kids are about your age. So when I'm on the ground, I get to exercise 6 or 7 days a week.
Thank you.
What is the most stressful part about being in space?
Just to verify for me, the question was, what's the most stressful part of being in space? I've been married to my wife for 20 years, and I've got 4 kids, and I miss them. Just like when I went on military deployments, it was hard to be away. It's no easier to be away in space. It's very much like a military deployment in that way. I miss them, and I'm looking forward to seeing them here in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Is there sound in space? If a rocket flew by the International Space Station, would you hear it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'll start by saying that the atmosphere that I'm breathing right now, that I'm in here in a pressurized module of the International Space Station where we live, the atmosphere is the same, very similar to what you were experiencing right there on the ground right now. The composition in terms of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, it's about the same for all practical purposes. So you need to have air molecules in order for sound to travel. So sound inside these modules is exactly like it is on Earth. But in the vacuum of space outside, of course, there are no air molecules to propagate that sound. And so there is no way for sound to propagate. But we can hear is vibrations. So when I'm outside in a spacesuit, I have a small amount of atmosphere around me. And so if I tapped on my spacesuit while I'm outside, because there is air inside the suit, I can hear the taps. But if your question was if a rocket zoomed by, would we hear it? The answer is no, we wouldn't, because there wouldn't be any air to propagate that sound to us.
Thank you.
What skills from being a U.S. Army doctor helped you succeed as an astronaut?
I believe the question was, how did being a military physician help me be a better astronaut? Was that about right?
Yes.
Well, astronauts come from all different backgrounds, professional backgrounds, and there are a small number of medical doctors in the astronaut corps right now. And as you can imagine, that's an important skill set to have as part of our bigger team, and having a medical doctor on board the ISS is a benefit, but it's not a requirement. So definitely my medical skill set adds to the team in that way, in case there was an emergency. But also my military training and background, as a result of outside of my medical training, my training doing tough, realistic, dangerous training in the Army, jumping out of airplanes, working in and around aircraft, diving, all of those skills that I learned in the military are very similar to the work that we do as astronauts. We do tough, realistic training that is dangerous, inherently dangerous. And so my military experiences helped prepare me for that.
Thank you. What did you have to do for NASA to select you for the expedition?
The best way to answer that is to tell you a little bit about kind of the life cycle of an astronaut. When an astronaut is first selected, they go through initial training that lasts about 2 years, called astronaut candidate training. And we only select an astronaut class about every 4 years. In fact, we just announced that we're going to select another class in 2021. The last class was selected in 2017, and my class was selected in 2013. So we go through training for the first 2 years after that, and we have to get our qualifications in robotics and spacewalking. We also have to learn a foreign language. Again, I mentioned earlier the importance of understanding other cultures. I've spent the last 6 or 7 years studying Russian to speak it at a level that is proficient enough to fly on board the International Space Station, because the commander of the ISS right now is Russian, and he speaks English, but I speak Russian as well, and we kind of meet in the middle. So we have to get a qualification in the foreign languages as well. We learn to fly high-performance jets and train in those. And then when we finish that candidate training, we get all those qualifications, then we're usually work on technical things after we're qualified as an astronaut. Maybe we're working on a new spacesuit, working on a new spacecraft, waiting our turn to be assigned to a specific mission. Then about 2 years before a mission launches, you'll be assigned. So 2 years prior to my launch, I was assigned to fly as part of Expedition 60, 61, and 62, which I'm a part of now. And we do a lot of the same training we did as candidates, but in even more depth in those 2 years leading up to, and a lot of it becomes more specific to the mission that we'll perform while we're up here. Then at the end of that 2 years, we launch into space. Then I'll live here on board for 9 months, and then I'll return to Earth, and I'll go through about a 6-month period of rehabilitation afterwards. And then the cycle starts all over again. And so that's kind of the, and to give you some perspective, I was selected in 2013, and now my landing will be in 2020. So that's it's a lot of years of training that lead up to this point, and then kind of go back to waiting your turn to fly to space the next time.
Thank you.
Have you been in any emergencies that need medical attention in space?
Fortunately, the answer is no, and there's a couple ways we go about that. Now, my background as an emergency physician makes me very comfortable with emergencies, but I don't want to have to deal with a medical emergency while I'm on board the International Space Station, because it is a difficult environment to work in and to get people off of if the emergency was extreme enough. But one of the things that we do is we make sure that our astronauts are very healthy before they ever launch, so we try to reduce the risk that something will happen by making sure that we're extremely healthy. We're studied inside and out by the time we get up here to the ISS. Then we do have the capability to talk to doctors and specialists on the ground through video conference or by telephone, so we can reach out and touch any kind of specialty that we need to. We also have all sorts of medications and equipment pre-positioned up here on board the ISS. And then in the most extreme situation, we could return somebody to Earth by getting back into our capsule and returning to Earth. But that would have to be a pretty extreme medical emergency.
Thank you.
What happens if you run out of water on the International Space Station?
I think the question was if we ran out of water. So we get water a couple different ways. I mentioned that we have resupply vehicles come every couple of months, and they bring us these giant tanks of water that help us replenish our water supply up here. And we keep a many months supply stockpiled up here to make sure that doesn't happen. But another interesting aspect of our water, though, is that we recycle our water. We take urine and we turn it back into drinking water. And so as long as we have urine, we'll have water. I know that sounds crazy, but that's the way it is on the ISS.
Thank you.
What is the best thing you remember about your school in England?
Well, I alluded to that a little bit already. I have great memories of living in England, in the United Kingdom, and the travel that I did with my family. Going to a DoD school at Woodbridge American High School, the travel that I got to do on sports teams, traveling all over England. As just an interesting side note, at one point our football team was good enough that we went all the way up to Berlin in 1989. Which at that time was part of East Germany, and I was on a trip there when the Berlin Wall came down in November 1989. And I never would have had an experience like that if it wasn't for the opportunity to live overseas as a military kid, going to DoD schools in the UK. The travel was fantastic, and I have just lifelong memories as a result of those experiences. And I know that you guys are building some of the same memories with your families as part of your experience. So cherish those experiences now.
Thank you. How do you sleep in space?
Well, so I'll tell you a little bit about our crew quarters, which it's like our quarters are about the size of a small walk-in closet, or sometimes I say a telephone booth, but I don't know if everybody there knows what a telephone booth is anymore. But just picture a very small box about as tall as I am, and that is our personal space that we're able to keep our personal items in. We have a computer so that we can do email on and make phone calls, like I mentioned. But we also have a sleeping bag in there. And there, in the U.S. segment of the ISS, there are 4 crew quarters, and one is in the ceiling, one is in each wall, and then one is in the floor. Because, like I said, we have no sense of which way is up, and so it doesn't matter if you're sleeping upside down. It wouldn't feel like you were sleeping upside down. But our sleeping bag kind of contains us like a little cocoon. It zips up and holds us tight, and you can float your arms outside of the sleeping bag even if you'd like. But I find that I get very restful sleep up here, and I sleep about as long as I do on Earth. So it's very comfortable sleeping here.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
What made you want to become an astronaut?
So I always had an interest in space and exploration as a young kid. At several places along the way in my life, and as part of growing up, in stateside, I lived in Texas and California, and it was in the heart of the space shuttle era, and I saw the space shuttle a number of times, got to see the space shuttle land, so I was very inspired by space at an early age. But the first thing that I decided was to serve in the military. I wanted to be a soldier in the Army, and then I became a doctor because I wanted to be a doctor to take care of the brave men and women that serve our country, and I did that for a number of years. But then I always, in the back of my mind, I was keeping track of a lifelong dream of potentially becoming an astronaut, and I was fortunate enough that I applied and I was selected. But I also would have been very happy to continue doing what I was doing as a military physician. I had a great job. I think that it was one of the best jobs in the world, and I would highly recommend it to any of you that are interested in following that pathway.
Thank you.
Dr. Morgan and everyone at NASA, thank you very much. Alconbury Middle-High School and all of DoDEA wish you a safe and successful completion of your mission. Thank you also to all the people who worked behind the scenes to make this event happen. You are out of this. Have a great afternoon.
Hey, thank you so much, Alconbury High School, and everybody that's dialed in from remote places participating. You guys are experiencing some of the greatest memories of your life right now, making friends for life out at your schools. I'm very proud of how you're doing and all that you have ahead of you. Make the most of the experiences that you have. Thank you for following along my mission, and thanks for taking time to join me today up here on board the International Space Station. Take care.
Bye. Bye. Bye.